The turkey was getting cold, but nobody seemed to notice. My entire family was too busy dissecting my life failures for the 100th time this year. Mom had set the dining room table with her finest china, the same pattern she'd inherited from Grandma Rose, but the elegant setting couldn't mask the tension that had been building since I walked through the door 2 hours ago. "Alexandra, honey," Mom began with that patronizing tone I'd grown to despise. "We're just concerned about your future. 32 is still young, but you can't keep living in that tiny apartment forever, working on these creative projects." Marcus, my older brother by 4 years, leaned back in his chair with the satisfied smirk of someone who just closed another 7-figure real estate deal. His wife Jennifer nodded along, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the chandelier light as she cut her turkey with surgical precision. "It's embarrassing," Marcus continued, warming up to his favorite topic. "When people ask what my sister does, what am I supposed to say? That she makes little videos in her bedroom? That she's still chasing Hollywood dreams like some teenager?" Dad, who had been quietly nursing his second glass of wine, finally spoke up. "Your brother has a point, sweetheart. Marcus owns 3 properties now. Jennifer's law practice is thriving, and they're talking about starting a family. Maybe it's time to consider something more stable." I pushed the cranberry sauce around my plate, the same way I'd been pushing their criticism around for the past 5 years. They had no idea what I actually did, never bothered to ask the right questions, never looked beyond the surface of my deliberately modest lifestyle. "I have a stable income," I said quietly, not looking up from my plate. "From what?" Jennifer laughed, her perfectly veneered teeth gleaming. "YouTube ad revenue? Do you know how pathetic that sounds to actual professionals?" The truth was, I'd been incredibly careful about maintaining this facade. While they saw a struggling creative living in a modest 1-bedroom apartment, driving a 7-year-old Honda Civic, and wearing clothes from Target, the reality was far different. Phoenix Studios had been my life's work for the past 8 years, built from nothing into what industry insiders knew as the most innovative content creation company in Hollywood. But I'd learned early on that family dynamics were complicated. When I'd started making real money 3 years ago, I'd made the strategic decision to keep living exactly the same way. Same apartment, same car, same wardrobe. I'd watched too many families torn apart by sudden wealth, seen too many relationships poisoned by envy and entitlement. "You know what I think?" Marcus was really getting wound up now, his voice rising with each word. "I think you're afraid of real responsibility. You've created this fantasy world where you can play pretend forever, where you never have to grow up and face reality like the rest of us." "Marcus," Mom warned, but he was on a roll. "No, I'm serious. Look at her." He gestured at me with his fork. 32 years old, no husband, no kids, no real career, living like she's still in college. It's honestly sad at this point. Jennifer chimed in with her lawyer voice, the one she probably used in depositions. "We're not trying to be cruel, Alexandra. We love you. But love means telling the truth, even when it's hard to hear." "The truth is," Dad added, setting down his wine glass with more force than necessary, "we've been enabling this behavior for too long. Maybe it's time for some tough love." I felt the familiar knot forming in my stomach, the same feeling I'd had every Thanksgiving, Christmas, and family gathering for the past several years. The assumption that because I chose to live modestly, I must be struggling. The constant suggestions about real jobs and growing up. The barely concealed disappointment in their voices when they talked about me to their friends. "What exactly are you suggesting?" I asked, finally looking up to meet Dad's eyes. "We think you should move back home for a while," Mom said gently. "Just until you get back on your feet. You could use the guest room, help around the house, maybe take some time to figure out what you really want to do with your life." Marcus nodded enthusiastically. "It would be good for you. Structure, accountability, family support. And honestly, you'd save money on rent, which you clearly need to do." The irony was so thick I could cut it with the carving knife. Here they were, offering me the guest room in their suburban colonial, while I owned a production facility in Burbank that was bigger than their entire neighborhood. My little videos had generated more revenue in the past quarter than Marcus would see in his entire real estate career. "I appreciate the offer," I said carefully, "but I'm doing better than you think." Alexandra. Jennifer's voice had that practiced patience of someone talking to a difficult child. "Denial isn't going to help anyone here. We've all seen your apartment. We know what you drive. We know you shop at discount stores and live on ramen noodles. If only they knew that the struggling artist aesthetic was completely intentional. The apartment was modest by choice, not necessity. The Honda Civic was reliable and drew no attention. The Target clothes were comfortable and practical. Meanwhile, Phoenix Studios employed 847 people across 4 states and had exclusive distribution deals with every major streaming platform in the world. Maybe we should talk about something else," I suggested, hoping to deflect the conversation before it got even more uncomfortable. But Marcus wasn't finished. "No, we shouldn't talk about something else. This is exactly the problem. Every time we try to have a serious conversation about your future, you change the subject or make excuses." He leaned forward, his face flushed with wine and righteousness. "You want to know what I really think? I think you're scared. Scared of commitment, scared of responsibility, scared of actually trying and potentially failing at something real." "Real," I repeated, tasting the word like it was bitter. "Yes, real. Like owning property. Like building equity. Like having a career that people can understand and respect. Like contributing to society instead of just whatever it is you do all day." The dining room had gone completely silent, except for the grandfather clock ticking in the corner and the distant sound of football on the TV in the living room. Mom was staring at her hands, clearly uncomfortable with how aggressive the conversation had become. Dad was refilling his wine glass, avoiding eye contact with everyone. "I know this is hard to hear," Marcus continued, his voice softening slightly, but losing none of its condescension. "But someone has to say it. You're wasting your life, Alexandra. You're wasting your potential. You're wasting your intelligence, and honestly, you're wasting our time with these fantasy stories about being some kind of successful filmmaker." That's when the sound from the living room changed. The football commentary faded, replaced by the familiar Netflix logo chime and the urgent music that preceded breaking news announcements. "We interrupt this program for a special entertainment industry announcement," the announcer's voice carried clearly into the dining room. Jennifer rolled her eyes. "Can someone turn that down? We're trying to have a family conversation here." But something made me pay attention. Maybe it was the timing. Maybe it was intuition. Or maybe it was just the desperate hope that something, anything, would break the tension that was crushing me from all sides. In a landmark deal that's sending shockwaves through Hollywood, the voice continued, "Streaming giant Netflix has announced its largest content acquisition in company history." Marcus was still talking. Something about career counseling and reality checks, but his words were becoming background noise as I focused on the television. Phoenix Studios, the innovative production company behind some of the most critically acclaimed and commercially successful original content of the past 5 years, has signed an exclusive 8-year distribution deal worth an unprecedented $3.8 billion. The dining room went dead silent. Even Marcus stopped mid-sentence, his mouth hanging slightly open. The deal, negotiated over the past 18 months in complete secrecy, represents Netflix's commitment to premium original programming and positions Phoenix Studios as the streaming platform's primary content partner through 2032. I felt my heart hammering against my ribs, but I kept my face carefully neutral. This was the moment I'd been preparing for, the culmination of 2 years of incredibly delicate negotiations. My legal team had worked around the clock to ensure every detail was perfect, every contingency planned for. Phoenix Studios CEO Alexandra Winters, who founded the company 8 years ago at the age of 24, will retain full creative control while gaining access to Netflix's global distribution network spanning 190 countries. The silence in the dining room was so complete that I could hear the heater clicking on in the basement. 4 pairs of eyes were staring at me, but I didn't look back. I kept my attention on my plate, slowly cutting another piece of turkey, as if nothing unusual was happening. Industry analysts are calling this the deal of the decade, with some predicting that Phoenix Studios' valuation could reach $6 billion within the next 3 years. The agreement includes provisions for theatrical releases, international co-productions, and innovative interactive content that could revolutionize how audiences consume entertainment. Marcus's face had gone completely white. His fork was suspended halfway between his plate and his mouth, a piece of stuffing balanced precariously on the tines. Winters, who has been notoriously private about her company's operations, released a brief statement saying she's thrilled to partner with Netflix in bringing groundbreaking stories to audiences worldwide. The announcement has already sent Netflix stock up 12% in after-hours trading. Mom's hand was pressed against her chest, her breathing shallow and rapid. Dad had set down his wine glass so abruptly that red liquid sloshed onto the white tablecloth, but he didn't seem to notice. The Phoenix Studios deal represents a new paradigm in content creation, with industry insiders suggesting that other streaming platforms may need to reconsider their acquisition strategies to remain competitive. We'll have more analysis on this developing story throughout the evening. The program returned to regular football coverage, but nobody in the dining room moved. The only sound was the grandfather clock continuing its relentless ticking, marking seconds that felt like hours. Finally, Jennifer broke the silence with a whisper that was barely audible. "Alexandra?" I looked up from my plate, meeting her confused gaze with what I hoped was a calm expression. "Yes. The woman on TV," she stammered. She said Alexandra Winters. That's your name." "It is indeed," I confirmed, taking a sip of water. Marcus found his voice, though it came out as more of a croak. That can't be. You're not." "I'm not what?" I asked gently. "You're not a CEO," he said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "You live in a tiny apartment. You drive a Honda Civic. You buy your clothes at Target. You can't be worth billions of dollars." I set down my water glass and finally looked directly at him. "Why can't I be?" "Because," he gestured wildly around the dining room, "because if you were really worth that much money, you wouldn't live the way you do. You wouldn't dress the way you do. You wouldn't drive that car or live in that apartment or what? Act humble? Live modestly. Choose comfort over status symbols." Dad leaned forward, his face a mixture of confusion and dawning realization. "Alexandra, Are you telling us that you're actually the CEO of this Phoenix Studios? I am. And it's really worth billions of dollars. As of this afternoon, Netflix valued us at $3.8 billion for the exclusive rights deal. Our total company valuation, including our production facilities, intellectual property portfolio, and development pipeline, is closer to $5.2 billion. The numbers hung in the air like smoke, incomprehensible and overwhelming. I watched my family struggle to process information that completely contradicted everything they thought they knew about me. But how? Mom whispered. When? How did we not know? Because I didn't want you to know, I said simply. I've seen what sudden wealth does to families. I've seen how money changes relationships, creates expectations, breeds resentment. So I made a conscious choice to keep living exactly the same way I always had. Marcus was shaking his head slowly, like someone trying to wake up from a dream. This doesn't make sense. If you're really that successful, why didn't you tell us? Why let us think? Think what? That I was a failure? That I needed your help? That I should be ashamed of my choices? We didn't mean. Jennifer started, but I held up a hand. Actually, you did mean it. Every single word. Every criticism. Every suggestion. Every disappointed look and condescending comment. You meant all of it, because you believed it was true. I stood up from the table, my napkin falling to the floor. The question is, what does it mean that you were wrong? The dining room felt smaller somehow, the walls closing in around us. The family portrait above the sideboard seemed to be watching the scene unfold. 4 faces frozen in time back when things were simpler, back when we all knew our roles and stayed in our lanes. I need to make a phone call, I said, pulling out my iPhone. My investors are probably having heart attacks right about now. As if on cue, the phone started buzzing with incoming calls and text messages. The screen lit up with names that would be instantly recognizable to anyone in the entertainment industry. Agents, producers, directors, studio executives, all wanting to know about the Netflix deal that would reshape Hollywood's power structure overnight. Alexandra, wait. Dad's voice stopped me at the doorway. I don't understand. If you're really that successful, why do you still live like? Like what, Dad? Like someone who values substance over appearance. Like someone who'd rather invest in her business than impress people with expensive toys. I turned back to face the table, where my family sat frozen in their elegant dining room with their expensive china and their comfortable assumptions about success and failure. You want to know the truth. Phoenix Studios started in that tiny apartment you're all so embarrassed by. Every script, every deal, every creative decision that built this company happened in that space you think is beneath me. The Honda Civic has driven me to meetings with some of the most powerful people in Hollywood. The Target clothes have been in boardrooms where billion-dollar decisions were made. My phone buzzed again, this time with a call from my head of publicity. The Netflix announcement was just the beginning. By tomorrow morning, every entertainment trade publication in the world would be running the story. But more importantly, I continued, I've been happy. Genuinely, authentically happy with my life and my choices. Can you say the same? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Marcus's successful real estate career suddenly seemed less impressive when measured against my $3.8 billion deal. Jennifer's thriving law practice felt smaller in comparison to a company that employed nearly 1,000 people. Even Mom and Dad's comfortable retirement looked different when viewed through the lens of my actual success. We had no idea, Mom said finally, her voice barely audible. No, you didn't. Because you never asked the right questions. You saw the surface and assumed you knew everything. You saw modest choices and interpreted them as failure. You saw contentment and mistook it for lack of ambition. I walked back to the table and placed both hands on the back of my chair. Do you want to know what Phoenix Studios actually does? We tell stories about people who are underestimated, overlooked, dismissed by those who should know better. We create content about individuals who find success on their own terms, who build something meaningful without needing external validation. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. I'd been living the exact story that Phoenix Studios had been telling for 8 years, and my own family had cast themselves as the antagonists without even realizing it. The Netflix deal isn't just about money, I explained. It's about having the resources and platform to tell those stories on a global scale, to show audiences around the world that success doesn't always look the way people expect it to. My phone rang again, and this time I answered it. This is Alexandra. Alex. The voice belonged to David Chen, my head of international distribution. Holy shit, the Netflix announcement just went live. My phone hasn't stopped ringing. We've got calls from Amazon, Apple, Disney, HBO Max. Everyone wants to know if we're taking on additional projects. That's the plan, I said, very aware that my family was hanging on every word. This deal gives us the stability to be more selective, more creative. We can finally make the projects we've always dreamed about. The trade publications are going crazy. Variety wants an exclusive interview. Hollywood Reporter is planning a cover story. And someone from 60 Minutes called about a segment on the changing landscape of content creation. Schedule everything through Maria, I said, referring to my assistant. And make sure our legal team is prepared for the contract discussions that are going to start tomorrow. Already on it. Also, congratulations, Alex. 8 years of building this company, and now the whole world gets to see what we've accomplished. I ended the call and looked back at my family, who were staring at me with expressions ranging from awe to confusion to something that might have been embarrassment. That was my head of international distribution, I explained. Phoenix Studios doesn't just create content for American markets. We have projects in development across 6 continents, partnerships with production companies in 12 countries, and distribution deals that reach nearly 2 billion people. Marcus had found his voice again, though it sounded different now, smaller somehow. I don't understand how we didn't know. How did you hide something this big? I didn't hide it. I just didn't advertise it. There's a difference. But your apartment, your car, are exactly what I need them to be. The apartment is 10 minutes from my production facility in Burbank. The car is reliable and gets excellent gas mileage. The clothes are comfortable and professional. None of those choices were made out of necessity. They were made out of preference. I sat back down at the table, suddenly feeling exhausted. The adrenaline of the Netflix announcement was wearing off, replaced by the complex emotions of watching my family recalibrate their entire understanding of who I was. I need you all to understand something, I said slowly. This isn't about proving you wrong or making you feel bad about your assumptions. This is about the fact that you never really saw me at all. Mom's eyes were filling with tears. Honey, we love you. We've always loved you. I know you love the idea of me. But you've spent years trying to change me into someone different, someone who fit your definition of success. You never considered that maybe I was already successful, just not in ways you recognized. The grandfather clock chimed 8 o'clock, its deep bronze tones echoing through the dining room. Outside, it was fully dark now, and the neighbors' houses glowed with warm yellow light. Families were finishing their own Thanksgiving dinners, probably having their own complicated conversations about success and failure, about expectations and reality. "What happens now?" Dad asked quietly. "Now I go back to my life," I said. "Phoenix Studios has a $3.8 billion deal to execute, which means the next 18 months are going to be incredibly intense. We're going to be creating more content than we've ever produced, working with bigger budgets and higher stakes than we've ever experienced. Could we visit your studio sometime?" Jennifer asked hesitantly. I studied her face, looking for signs of genuine interest versus simple curiosity about my newfound wealth and status. "Why do you want to visit?" "Because I realize I don't know anything about what you actually do, and I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry we made assumptions." It was a start. Not a complete transformation, not an instant healing of years of dismissal and condescension, but a beginning. "The studio runs tours for industry professionals and investors," I said. "I could arrange something if you're genuinely interested in understanding the business." Marcus leaned forward. "Would it be possible to? I mean, could we see some of the projects you're working on? The things that will be on Netflix?" "Some of them. The projects that aren't under strict confidentiality agreements." My phone buzzed with another text message, this one from my business manager. The Netflix announcement had triggered a series of financial reviews and portfolio adjustments that would need my attention over the next few days. Success at this level wasn't just about creative fulfillment. It was about managing complex business relationships and massive financial responsibilities. "I should probably head home," I said, standing up again. "Tomorrow is going to be chaotic, and I need to prepare for a lot of very important conversations." "Of course," Mom said quickly. "But Alexandra, could we try to do better? As a family, I mean, could we start over? Maybe get to know who you really are?" I looked around the table at the 4 people who had raised me, supported me, and simultaneously underestimated me for the better part of a decade. They weren't evil people. They were just people who had made assumptions and stuck to them long past the point where those assumptions made sense. "I'd like that," I said honestly. "But it has to be real. No more interventions about my life choices. No more suggestions about what I should be doing differently. No more treating me like someone who needs to be fixed or saved." "Deal," Dad said immediately. "And no sudden expectations about money or lifestyle changes. I'm still going to live in my apartment, drive my Honda, and shop at Target. Success didn't change who I am. It just gave me more resources to be myself." "We understand," Marcus said, though I wasn't entirely sure he did yet. I walked around the table, hugging each of them goodbye. The embraces felt different now, charged with new understanding and the promise of more honest relationships going forward. As I drove home in my 7-year-old Honda Civic, my phone continued buzzing with calls and messages from the entertainment industry elite. The Netflix deal would officially transform Phoenix Studios from a well-respected production company into a major Hollywood power player, but more importantly, it would give me the platform to tell the stories I'd always believed needed telling. Stories about people who succeed quietly, who build empires in apartments and boardrooms alike, who choose substance over spectacle and authenticity over appearance. Stories about families who learn to see each other clearly, perhaps for the first time. I pulled into the parking lot of my modest apartment complex, the same building where Phoenix Studios had been born 8 years ago, in a spare bedroom that doubled as an office. Tomorrow, the entertainment world would be calling me an overnight sensation, a sudden success story, a Cinderella narrative of dreams coming true. but I knew the truth. This hadn't been overnight or sudden or magical. It had been 8 years of deliberate choices, careful planning, and the courage to define success on my own terms, even when the people who loved me most couldn't see the value in what I was building. The Netflix deal was just the beginning. Phoenix Studios was about to enter a new phase of growth and influence, with the resources to tell bigger stories and reach wider audiences than ever before. But at its core, the company would remain exactly what it had always been: a place where underestimated people could tell their stories and be seen, finally, for who they really were. As I climbed the stairs to my apartment, I thought about next Thanksgiving dinner. It would probably be different this time, with new dynamics and deeper conversations. Maybe we'd even have it at my place for once, in the modest apartment where billion-dollar deals were born and authentic success was quietly built, one story at a time.